you want to understand why I left the place I was at, you're just really gonna have to hear the entire story. You won't believe it, of course, but your skepticism means nothing, because what I saw that night on the bayou has been with me ever since. In my mind, in my thoughts, and sometimes even in my dreams. It exists as a disturbing memory that I cannot shake away, that will never go away, just so long as I live. It will be one of those things so terrifying that it will still be just as keen in my mind on my deathbed as it was the day it occurred. But whether you believe me or not, I'll sure tell you anyways. If not only to serve as a warning, a plea for caution, if you ever find yourself near the swamps late at night. At the time, I was working at a shitty little fast food place. The only thing worse than working at a shitty little fast food place is working at a shitty little fast food place on the night shift, by yourself, without a vehicle. Such was my case some years ago, the night this event happened to me. During this time, I lived quite a few miles away from the restaurant I worked at, and due to my lack of a vehicle, or any access to a public bus system, I was dependent on others for my transportation to and from work. One night, after a busy evening of serving customers, I closed the store and locked up the restaurant. When I phoned for my ride, nobody answered. Now, I'm not here to throw a pity party, but I cannot help but to express anger at the fact that this person who drove me to and from work was my roommate, who had a car but no fucking job, and I was basically the only person in our house who paid the rent at this time. So this loser had the carelessness to fall asleep, leaving me no fucking option but to walk again. This is not the first time this has happened. The first time it happened, it took me an hour and a half to get home, walking briskly, and to those who have never been in the rural regions of Louisiana, you have no clue. Here we have what's called a bayou. It's basically a swamp, thick, murky, moist, frog-laden, mosquito-swarming, gator-infested, crap-smelling swamp, with thick, tall grass, cattails, cypress trees, and heaves of pond scum. And I just so happen to live on the bayou, all the way down a long dirt road with hardly any streetlights, and thick swamp on both sides of the road. There are no side roads, and the houses down the street are separated sometimes by more than a quarter mile apart. It's not merely spooky walking down this road at night, it's fucking terrifying. You hear sounds both real and imagined coming from the bayou. Chirping, croaking, howling, grunting animals. The rustling of leaves and branches in the canopy of the cypress trees, and the splashing water from underneath them. That's the worst. You can hear the sound of something lurking nearby abruptly dunk underwater. It could be a turtle, a snake, or an alligator. You never know. You just gotta keep walking with your teeth and hands clenched tight, hoping nothing crawls through the tall grass next to you and onto the road. Or even worse than the subtle dunking sounds, the sudden splashes that happen when you're walking and scare a toad or a frog and it jumps into the water. The sound makes you almost shit yourself as you begin a running spree that lasts about 3 seconds before you realize that it was. And then you're left with your heart pounding so hard the sound of your blood gushing in your temples still scares you just as much. These are the types of things that happen when you're in the bayou. And this is what I have to look forward to that night my asshole roommate slept sprawled on the sofa with the television probably set to reruns of the Three Stooges and the Marx Brothers. And don't get the impression that I simply called once and gave up. You can trust that his cell phone had around 7 or so missed calls, 3 very unfriendly voicemails, and several aggressive text messages. I could just imagine his phone lying in another room of the house, softly vibrating my desperate attempts to reach him, as he snored. But eventually I gave up, and having just about no other friends to contact in the area as a recourse, I stopped by the nearby gas station, grabbed an energy drink, and began my ways back home. Now you must understand, the first 30 or so minutes of my walk isn't that bad. I'm still in the most populated part of town, and there are streetlights, stores, houses, and cars passing in large numbers. That's important. If there are a lot of cars going by, you feel safer than when there are very few cars going by, Because when there are only 1 or 2 cars that pass you every 3 minutes, that means that there could be a psychopath in one of those cars, and he might have enough time to stop by and murder you without being caught. But if there are a lot of cars around, there may be psychopaths passing by, but they'll most likely not kill you then, because there are too many people around to witness the crime. At least that's my reasoning, but I digress. No psychopaths pulled up next to me as I walked down this part of town. Next, there comes a time in my journey where I have to turn down several suburban neighborhoods and walk down some streets to get where I'm going. And here's where things get a little less safe, and I have to be a little more cautious. There's less traffic down these roads, and you never know when some punk or gang member might be hanging out in some empty lot or house, who might mess with you or try to pick a fight or mug you or just take an empty bottle of malt liquor and just bash your skull in, as an initiation ritual or something. These are the thoughts that go through my head as I walk down this region, and they keep me on my toes until I reach the point where the houses become fewer and fewer and the bayou begins. This is where the dirt road leading to my home is, and that's where I found myself this night, on foot. I look down the narrow road. You can only see so far before it fades into misty darkness. I resented that I would have to spend the next hour walking its distance to reach my home. But anger took hold of fear when I thought about how all of this could be spared if not for the neglect and carelessness of my roommate. When I got home, I was really going to have it in for him. I truly considered at this possibility of physically smacking his damn face. And with this thought in mind, I launched defiantly down the road. And the further I walked, the darker it became, until no light shined but the stars and the silver moon above me. Very soon, the sound of any vehicle was completely non-existent. There was just me, the road, and the bayou, and whatever creatures dwelt there. I heard the crickets chirp and the frogs croak and the occasional bird coo. To avoid fear, I focused on their course and let the sounds preoccupy my mind. I walked watching my shoes pressed into the sandy dirt as I placed one foot in front of the other. I could count my steps until I reached 100, then I began again. I tried to lose myself in the repetition. My shoes became damper and damper, and I felt the soles of my feet become moist. I stopped counting to ponder whether I should smack my roommate with a wet sock, but my thought was interrupted when I glanced up for a moment and saw that I was not alone on this road. A sharp panic seized my heart when I became very nervous. A long distance up the road ahead of me, I could discern a soft silhouette of a figure. It was so far away that I couldn't tell if it was moving ahead or in my direction. I froze. I could feel the blood gushing my temples. What were the chances of there being a malicious punk wandering the streets at night looking to rob me or pick a fight? This was the reassuring thought that I had as I tried to convince myself that I was safe. I tried to keep calm, not to let my nerves get the best of me. Whoever this was just as frightened as the prospect of me as I was of them. If they had already detected me, that is. I didn't know what to do. Run? There was only 2 directions. Continue walking? What were the risks? As I stood there, I saw the figure was indeed moving in my direction, and his form was becoming more defined. And this was the time I began to notice how awkward he was moving. The figure didn't walk normal. It didn't bob up and down like a normal person looks as they walk. It was coming towards me. It would seem from my perspective, it moved in short, quick, jerking movements. And I could see from what light was present how its twitchy limbs projected from its torso, and how it was getting closer, and how its head stuck out from a neck that was longer than any human neck should be, and how at this time I could faintly hear the noises it seemed to be making, the sound of suckling, and how it was moving quicker, and how its face lifted, and I could see its eyes glaring like glowing yellow beads, and how these wide beady eyes locked onto mine, staring at me, and how it stopped, and how we were both there, motionless, yards away, looking at each other, and how it let out the most ungodly and inhuman screech I've ever heard, like a pig being gutted. It squealed violently, and the sounds resounded through the bayou, and the chirping and croaking of crickets and frogs all stopped, and the rumbling and humming was all that could be heard afterwards. The rumbling and humming of a motor ahead, the vehicle speeding towards us, tires racing loudly. The thing in front of me hunched over, and I could see the headlights beaming our way. It hissed, getting down on all fours, only pausing for a moment to turn back towards me, gawking with its wide eyes before crawling hastily into the swamp. The vehicle that scared the thing away was my roommate's car. He never saw it, whenever it was. I never wanted to see it again. I moved as soon as I could, and I haven't been there since.